He had a unique skill set that transcended multiple generations. Finishing with over 1,300 points over a 20-year NHL career, he is one of the most proficient two-way centers of all time. And after hanging up the skates for the final time this past spring, today we're going to take a walk through the career of LA Kings legend and future Hall of Famer Anze Kopitar. Drafted 11th overall by the Los Angeles Kings in the 2005 NHL entry draft, Kopitar spent his first season after his draft year playing in the Swedish Elite League. Now diving into his NHL career. At 19 years old, Anze Kopitar played his first game for the Kings in the 2006-2007 season, putting up 61 points in 72 games. He was third on the Kings in scoring and fourth in Calder voting, so not a bad rookie year. The Kings, not a great team at that time. Head coach Mark Crawford led the team to a 27-41-14 record, good enough for 68 points, and fourth in the Pacific Division. They were the fourth worst team in the league in goals against at that time. Now, remember that number because this gets a lot better over time. Of course, with only 68 points, the Kings did miss the playoffs, but a very promising first season for the young future face of the franchise. Year number 2, 07-08, Kopitar had a massive improvement on his rookie season, 32 goals, 77 points in 82 games, and this time he did lead the Kings in scoring. In just his second year, he leads the team in scoring by 10 points as well. He was 10 points ahead of Alex Frolov, who was number 2 on the team, and he even made the All-Star game that year. Again, coached by Mark Crawford, the Kings failed to make the playoffs. A record of 32, 43, and 7. 71 points. That year they finished last in the Pacific Division, and they had the third worst goals against. So actually a little bit worse than the previous season. 13th in goals for, so they were getting better offensively, but still not a great defensive team. It looks like Kopitar was saving his sophomore slump for his third season because he went down to 27 goals and only 66 points in 82 games. Still not a bad season. He still led the team in scoring, but it was another rough year for the LA Kings. Mark Crawford was let go after the 07-08 season, and they brought in Terry Murray, who led the team to a 34, 37, and 11 record, 79 points, still fifth in the Pacific. But now they were 11th in the league in goals against, so very quickly getting much better on the defensive side of the game. Year number 4, and this is where Anze Kopitar himself and the Kings as a team really come into their own. This is where the seed was planted for the 2010s Kings that we knew so well. Kopitar himself finished with 81 points in 82 games, good for 17th in the entire league, and led by Terry Murray once again. The Kings' 46 wins and 101 points were good enough to make the playoffs for the first time in Kopitar's career. They finished 9th in goals for and against during the regular season. You're really starting to see the impact that guys like Kopitar and Drew Doughty and Jonathan Quick had on the turnaround of this franchise. In the playoffs, they only lasted 6 games. They lost to the Vancouver Canucks, who were a perennial contender at the time. But Kopitar still managed to put up 5 points in 6 games, and it only gets better from here for Kopitar and the Kings. 2010-11, Kopitar again nearly a point per game, 73 points in 75 games, and a plus 25, which was good enough to land him 9th in Selke voting. Get used to the word Selke. I'm going to be saying it a lot for the rest of this video. He also made his second All-Star game, and once again, led by Terry Murray, the Kings finished with another 46-win season, good enough for 4th in the Pacific and to make the playoffs for the second consecutive season. But unfortunately, Kopitar was injured and did not play a single game in those playoffs. In a game against Colorado, the 75th game of the season, he suffered a high ankle sprain with torn ligaments that required surgery. And this actually ended at the time, franchise record 330 consecutive games played streak for the young Kopitar. The Kings ended up losing without Kopitar in the lineup to the San Jose Sharks in the first round in 6 games. 2011-12. Now, we all know how this season ended, but we may forget how it began. It was a rough start for Terry Murray's Kings. They went on a 13-12-4 run to open the season, which was good enough to get him fired and temporarily replaced by John Stevens, former head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. He had a 2-2 record before they brought in the veteran coach Daryl Sutter. The Kings then went on a 25-13-11 run to end the season with Sutter, and it was just good enough to finish 8th in the Western Conference. They got that final playoff spot despite only finishing 29th in goals for that season. Kopitar himself not too shabby, 76 points in 82 games. He was a plus 12 and finished 9th in Selke voting, and that's because the Kings finished 2nd in the entire NHL in goals against. So 29th in goals for, but 2nd in goals against. And luckily, as they say, defense wins championships, because the Kings, the 8th seed, just barely slipped into the playoffs, and they took over. They immediately defeated the former Western Conference champions and current President's Trophy winning Vancouver Canucks in 5 games in the first round. They absolutely shocked the Vancouver Canucks, only gave the President's Trophy winners 1 win before advancing to the second round, where they swept the St. Louis Blues and defeated the Phoenix Coyotes in, again, 5 games to advance to the Stanley Cup final for the first time since 1993. And in the Stanley Cup final, they drew the New Jersey Devils, and this ended up being the longest series that the Kings ended up playing in that entire playoff run, but it still wasn't very long. 6 games, the Kings won their first Stanley Cup in franchise history, and Anze Kopitar had himself a run. Point per game, 20 points in 20 playoff games, and a plus 16. Now, unfortunately, the 2012-13 season was cut short due to another NHL lockout, but in just 47 games, Kopitar still managed to put up 42 points and finished 4th in Selke voting. He is slowly but surely working his way into the top 3 in that category, and led by their Stanley Cup champion head coach Daryl Sutter, the Kings managed to make the playoffs once again. And they defeated the St. Louis Blues once again, this time in the first round, in 6 games. In the second round, they went up against the San Jose Sharks, the team that eliminated them 2 years prior, and they got the revenge. In a back-and-forth series, the Kings knocked out San Jose in Game 7 to match up against the Chicago Blackhawks in the Western Conference Final. The 2010 Stanley Cup champions against the 2012 Stanley Cup champions, and Chicago won this one. Their first meeting goes to Chicago in 5 games, and the Blackhawks went on to win the Stanley Cup. Unfortunately for Kopitar, he only had 9 points in 18 games during that playoff run. It was a -2. If he had performed the way he had the previous season, maybe the Kings end up in back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. But he made up for it big time in 2013-14. 70 points in 82 games during the regular season. Not his highest point total, but a plus 34 was good enough to have him finish 2nd in Selke voting. The Kings finished with 100 points during the regular season and 1st in the NHL in goals against. They played once again the San Jose Sharks in the first round. For the 3rd time in 4 years, they faced San Jose, and it was not looking good. It looked like the Sharks were going to get their revenge for the year prior, went up 3-0 in the series before the Kings reverse swept the San Jose Sharks, came back and won in Game 7. They moved on to play the Anaheim Ducks in the Battle of California, and again, another 7-game series, and the Kings win in Game 7. In the Western Conference Final, for the 2nd consecutive season, they face off against the Chicago Blackhawks, the defending Stanley Cup champions. And, of course, it would only end one way in Game 7. The LA Kings take out the defending champs and are back in the Stanley Cup final for the 2nd time in 3 years, facing off against the Cinderella story New York Rangers. And they deal with the Rangers, winning that series in 5 games. Kopitar had an unbelievable run, 26 points in 26 playoff games. The Kings win their 2nd Stanley Cup in 3 years. Unfortunately for the Kings, that Stanley Cup final series against the Rangers would be the last playoff series they would win to this day. They have not won another playoff series in 12 years since that Stanley Cup final, and that drought started in 2014-15. Kopitar finishing his 9th year with only 64 points in 79 games, well below his career average, but still good enough to make his 3rd All-Star game and finish 3rd in Selke voting. But unfortunately for him and the LA Kings, the defending champs were now on the outside looking in. 15-16 saw a bounce back for Anze Kopitar and the LA Kings. With 74 points in 81 games, once again a plus 34, he took home the first Selke and Lady Byng trophies of his career, and certainly not the last. He finished 12th in league scoring, and the Kings with 102 points were back in the playoffs, playing against, once again, the San Jose Sharks. But unfortunately this time, even though Kopitar was nearly a point per game, 4 points in 5 games, the Kings did fall to the Sharks in 5 games, and the Sharks actually went all the way to the Stanley Cup final that year. For the 2016-17 season, the LA Kings unveiled their next captain Anze Kopitar. Former captain Dustin Brown was stripped of the C, and they decided it was Kopitar's turn. But unfortunately for he and the Kings, it was Kopitar's least productive season of his career to that point. With only 52 points in 76 games at a -10, it was the first time since his rookie year that he failed to lead the team in scoring, and the Kings missed the playoffs. And following their playoff miss, they fired longtime, two-time Stanley Cup champion head coach Daryl Sutter. Replacing Daryl Sutter was a familiar face in John Stevens, who had not been a head coach in the NHL since his previous 4-game stint with the Kings back in 2012. Moving on from the defensive-minded Daryl Sutter seemed to pay dividends for the LA Kings offense, and specifically Anze Kopitar. 35 goals and 92 points in 82 games, the best offensive season of his career. He finished 7th in the league in scoring, took home his 2nd Selke Trophy, went to his 4th All-Star game, and even finished 3rd in Hart Trophy voting. The Kings finished the season with 45 wins, good for 98 points, but were unfortunately swept by the brand new expansion franchise, the Vegas Golden Knights, in the first round. Kopitar finishing with just 2 points in 4 games. Following Kopitar's best offensive season of his career was one of the worst. In 2018-19, Kopitar finished with only 60 points in 81 games with a -20. He did hit the 1,000 games played mark this season, but that would prove to be the one highlight, as head coach John Stevens was fired just 13 games into the season and replaced by Willie Desjardins. Unfortunately, he went on just a 27-34-8 record, finishing with only 71 points on the season. The LA Kings missed the playoffs. After the disappointing 2018-19 season, Willie Desjardins was fired after a short stint and replaced by the longtime Sharks head coach Todd McLellan. This paid off pretty well for Kopitar. He finished with 62 points in 70 games, a bit better of a pace than his previous season. He went to his 5th All-Star game and finished 7th in Selke voting, although unfortunately the Kings missed the cutoff for the play-in round with a record of only 29-35-6 and would miss the playoffs for the 2nd consecutive season. The second COVID-shortened 2020-2021 season did not prove to be any better for the LA Kings. Although still a memorable one for Anze Kopitar, he was still able to put up 50 points in 56 games and scored his 1,000th career point at just 33 years old. Unfortunately, that was not enough to drag the Kings back into contention, as they still finished with a record of 21-28-7 for 6th in the West Division and missed the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive season. 2021-22 was a massive bounce back for this LA Kings team. Once again, under Todd McLellan, they finished with 99 points, and Kopitar himself 67 points in 81 games. He finished 6th in Selke voting and took home his first and only Mark Messier Leadership Award. But unfortunately for the Kings, yet again, they lose in round 1 in 7 games to the Edmonton Oilers. Kopitar putting up 4 points in those 7 games with a -6. You would think after that season that we've seen the best of Anze Kopitar and it's only going downhill from here, but he actually bounced back yet again at 35 years old. In 2022-23, the veteran put up 74 points in 82 games with a +20, good enough for his 2nd Lady Byng trophy, finishing 5th in Selke voting, and once again led the team in scoring. The Kings had the best season of his career so far with 104 points, once again making the playoffs, but once again losing to the Edmonton Oilers in the first round, this time in 6 games. Although Kopitar came to play this time 7 points in 6 games, but unfortunately still not good enough to beat Connor McDavid's Oilers. 2023-24 saw yet another Kings mid-season head coaching swap. Todd McLellan, after starting with a 23-15-10 record, was let go and replaced by Jim Hiller. Under Jim Hiller, the team went 21-12-1 for a total record of 44-27-11, finishing with 99 points. Kopitar, at 36 years old, had yet another productive season, 70 points in 81 games at a +12. He hit his 400th career goal this season and finished yet again 5th in Selke voting. The Kings were back in the playoffs, and once again, for the 3rd year in a row, facing off against Connor McDavid's Edmonton Oilers. But this year, they didn't lose in 7 games. They didn't lose in 6. They lost in 5. And in those 5 games, Kopitar put up just 3 points and was an even +-. They just cannot get by this Edmonton team. 2024-25, another productive season for Kopitar. At 37 years old, he puts up 67 points in 81 games, takes home his 3rd Lady Byng trophy, finishes 8th in Selke voting, and the Kings finished with a 105-point season. The second best defensive team in the league. They head into the playoffs for the 4th straight year, and for the 4th straight year, fall to Connor McDavid's Edmonton Oilers. Once again, in 6 games, to no fault of Anze Kopitar, he put up 9 points in 6 games, but they just cannot slay the dragon. The Oilers win again. In September of 2025, the 38-year-old Anze Kopitar announces that this season will be his last. But unfortunately for him, it was an injury-riddled final season, missing 4 games in October with an injury from a blocked shot, and 11 games in January with another lower body injury. For good old time's sake, the Kings replace another head coach midseason. Jim Hiller is out after a record of 24, 21, and 14, replaced by DJ Smith, who went 11, 6, and 6, for a total record of 35, 27, and 20, good enough for only 90 points. But luckily enough for the Kings, the West was so weak this year that they still managed to make the playoffs with just 90 points. But unfortunately, they drew the President's Trophy winning Colorado Avalanche and were escorted out of the building after a 4-game sweep. An anticlimactic ending to an absolutely unbelievable career. Anze Kopitar officially retired from the NHL on April 26th, 2026. So now, let's take a look at his final totals. In the regular season, Kopitar played 1,521 games, scoring 452 goals, 864 assists, and 1,316 points, finishing with a total plus-minus of plus 127. And in 11 playoff appearances, he played 107 games with 27 goals, 62 assists, and 89 points at a plus 4. He's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, 2-time Selke Trophy winner, 3-time Lady Byng Trophy winner. He won the Mark Messier Leadership Award once, was a 5-time All-Star, and finished with the most games played, assists, and points in LA Kings history. And in goals, he's in 3rd place behind Luc Robitaille and Marcel Dion. Just a few more stats to throw out there. Anze Kopitar was extremely durable, only missing 47 regular season games in his 20-year career, playing in 97% of the LA Kings regular season games since 2006. He led the Kings in scoring 15 times, and he is just one of 17 players all time to play for one franchise for 20 or more seasons. I'm really starting to feel old with guys like Anze Kopitar retiring. I was lucky enough to follow his entire career, and unfortunate enough to see his Kings defeat my Rangers in the 2014 Stanley Cup Final, but Kopitar is a first ballot Hall of Famer for sure. This video took a long time to put together, but I did have a lot of fun in the process, and I would like to do this with some more guys who have retired recently. With that said, I hope you all enjoyed. As always, thank you for watching, and take care.